Welcome to another episode of the Voices of Long COVID podcast. I'm your host, Noelle. I've been featuring some of the stories of fellow long COVID sufferers and trying to spread the word about this debilitating illness that continues to infect people daily. My hope is that you will learn more about it, protect yourself, and share this podcast with the people you know. Today I'm speaking with some of the behind-the-scenes heroes of this pandemic, the caregivers of people suffering from long COVID. They're going to share some of the changes that they have had to make to their lives and talk about the repercussions that long COVID has had on their families. I'm joined by Susan from West Vancouver, BC, whose son has long COVID.
Hi.
Allyson from Raleigh, North Carolina, who is Armani's wife. Armani was featured in episode 5.
Hi.
Ben from Calgary, Alberta, who is Christy's husband. Christy, you may remember, was featured in episode 2.
Oh.
And also from Calgary, Nandini, whose daughter has long COVID and was featured in episode 10.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and for being open to share your experience with me. I know it's not easy. And we also have a special guest. It was actually her idea to do this episode about caregivers, and that's my 12-year-old daughter.
Hi.
Thank you for your idea. First of all, on behalf of all the long haulers out there, I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for what you're doing each and every day to support your loved one while they're coping with this horrible condition. I know that they appreciate you so much. So starting with the questions, many people don't believe that long COVID patients are sick, including many of our own family members. What led you to believe that your family member is ill? Allyson.
So, in the beginning, just because, what Armani was experiencing initially was kind of like that tachycardia, eventually the SVT. That is kind of what led me to believing what he was going through was real. Just because myself as a person, I experience anxiety quite frequently, and I have elevated heart rates and I have a very physiological response to anxiety. So, I have my Apple Watch. Sometimes it'll tell me like, hey, your heart rate is really high. You're not exercising. Maybe you should be concerned. And then just like take it off. I'm like, oh, don't need that negativity. I'm like, I understand it's my anxiety. And I also kind of thought it was maybe anxiety because that's all he was experiencing, kind of like these elevated heart rates. But the day he experienced the SVT, I was actually, I think he mentioned it in the episode, I was at the doctor's office and he was supposed to be going to DC to visit a friend. And when I was coming back from the doctor's, I didn't expect to see him there. As I was walking back, I saw an ambulance outside of our apartment building. So I check his location and I see that he says that he's here. And it kind of all clicked for me in that moment. I'm like, that EMS is outside. It shows that he's here. His stuff is here. And right in that moment, I get a call from EMS and they're telling me that he's downstairs and everything that's going on. So I was like, okay, this isn't anxiety. My heart rate is going up. This is serious. So I raced down and at that moment, they were just like, we're lucky that we caught it because they hooked him up to the monitors immediately. And like we were able to catch it, which is kind of the difficulty with these things, especially with anything in your heart. You have to be able to catch that moment where your body's experiencing that. Unless you're hooked up to something 24/7, it's not gonna it cannot happen. So they were like, yeah, we caught it, and we think he's gonna be admitted. And it would have been hard to ignore that.
For us, my son is now 35, and he got sick when he was 32, and I don't ever remember him being sick, really, with anything. I mean, he was lived on his own and was working and so on. But he had come home because he wanted to make some changes in his job. And so he was staying with us. And it literally happened overnight. One day he was well. And the next day, it was September 20th, 2021. He was sick and very sick. Like, it's hard to remember back because so much has happened, the sequence of events. But he had, he couldn't get out of bed, and he felt like he had a bad flu, that malaise that comes with long COVID, and he had blurry vision, and like literally it just came overnight, and he didn't get better. He was in between jobs. He'd left his last job, so he was home. And then I started to do some researching, and I fairly quickly realized that he must have long COVID, and we went on from there. So it was very acute, like the day. I remember the day, and I've kept sort of a journal of what he's taken, and how sick he was and all that kind of stuff. And so I know that day will be in my head forever, definitely forever.
Yeah, I think we all remember our COVID anniversaries. It's hard to forget.
Yeah.
What about you? Why do you believe that I'm sick?
Because you used to go on walks and hikes all the time with us on the weekend, but now you just rest on the couch all day, and that's it. I don't.
Yeah. So you remember going hiking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised you remember, because I've been sick since you were like 8, I think. Yeah. And one of the things that we did when I first became housebound was we read a book, and it's called How Many Marbles? And it's really great. I really recommend it for families with younger children. And it talks about how the mom has a chronic illness and only has so many marbles in the jar, and the marbles are energy. And when the marbles are gone, the energy is gone. And I think that really helped you to understand too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as a patient, I sometimes forget my own capabilities, and that every day is different. Has there ever been a time that you underestimated how sick your family member is, or forgotten that they were sick?
Yeah. So, it just because every day is so different. Some days are better than others. One day maybe Armani can tolerate doing one thing, and the next day he can't. It can be, that is difficult to navigate, but yeah, sometimes I definitely do forget that he is sick, and I'm like, let's go on an adventure. And then he's just like dying in the back. And I'm just like, I'm sorry. I forgot. Or maybe like after we've had a good day, I just think maybe tomorrow will be the same, and it's not. So it can be hard, and it's not, I would say maybe not so much that I forget he's sick. I just it's more that adjustment, that lifestyle adjustment, and kind of getting out of those old routines, and that old mindset, that not really the old mindset of like how we could just, I guess, be just without kind of concern for everything we do. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to be concerned that if we walked to the restaurant down the street that he would be tired, and would that take it out of him. We didn't have to be concerned that if he came with me to run some errands, that it would tire him out for the rest of the day, or just kind of things like that. So definitely it not necessarily us underestimating how sick he is. I think it's been like about 9 months now. I'm definitely very aware. Maybe more in the beginning, as we were kind of feeling it out and figuring it out, I underestimated maybe how sick he felt. But now it's more just kind of readjusting my thinking, and readjusting how I approach our day together. That's not something I can do on my own. A lot of times I have, when he wakes up, I have to ask him, like, how are you feeling today? Like, what do you feel up for? What do you feel that you can do within within reason? Because, you can always feel like you're able to do something, and then it isn't until you finish doing it that he's just like, oh, maybe that was pushing it. Especially if you get like this kind of like burst of energy, or like what he calls like a burst of energy. You want to use it. You want to have that sense of normalcy, so to speak, and then come to regret it later because it's like, nope, should have maybe not used all my marbles on that one.
Yeah, it's so unpredictable, and the problem is that it's delayed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'll get that burst of energy and I'll do too much because I want to take advantage of that energy, and then it's not for 24 hours later that it hits me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so unpredictable. Anyone else want to talk about that one?
Yeah, it's very similar. She'll have some good days, and recently she's had a couple of good days that she could string together, and then a bad day, right? So then it's, when I was new to this and new to the relationship, it was, what am I expecting, right? Didn't know what to expect. It seemed very almost random. But now it's, if she goes too many days in a row, then by the second or third or fourth day for sure, I just come to expect it. So I make sure I plan a day of write-off or two, right? And so that's not going to be something that we just have to. And I also then planning with it as well is just one thing a day. That not where before I like to eat, like this morning would be as a good example. I'm here to be able, and I can talk because she's able to just rest, and I expect that basically nothing before noon. Before noon is my time so I can kind of deal with the kids and get them ready and kind of work on a project. But after that, then I'm with her and doing the one thing that she wants to do for the afternoon, and then it's just kind of usually a low-key evening. Like it's changed versus I could be able to go in the past, you're up and then you have an adventure for the full day and then into the evening, and then you're just tired at the end of the day like normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, for us, it's been over 2.5 years of dealing with this. And after that period of time, you hope that you see the patterns, even though they're inconsistent, there still is some consistency to inconsistency. I have to remind myself every day that not to get frustrated, because it's still frustrating. He's not my spouse, or my partner. He's my son, and he's 35. So, and he's really good some days. And then I don't have, he does his own thing pretty much, but I try and be aware of the days that he's not so good. And then I don't expect him to be involved so much in the chores or do the dishes or whatever. And but it's still difficult and it's still frustrating. But because we've been in this for so long now, I can sense when things have shifted in the morning. I can sense, if he's not feeling well. I want to support him to get better. And he only has so much energy, so I'm still involved. But yeah, there are definitely some days where I have to remind myself, although I don't have to remind myself very often, I can tell you, because the signs are there every day. I'm reminded every day that he's compromised. And I try to look past it.
Yeah, kind of to what Susan said of maybe that frustration that you'll feel just because, maybe he's not Armani won't be so, he maybe he looks a little bit better, or maybe he's just, and he'll be sitting on the couch and maybe I'm like taking care of a lot of things. I'm like, oh, maybe there's like one thing you can do. And then it's just like, but is there? And it just like turns into like this internal battle with yourself. You're like, recognizing like this is hard. Like it's not hard, only hard for him, it's hard for me. I have to take on a lot. And then feeling kind of guilty about maybe having some sort of expectation. And just kind of going back and forth between that, because there's validity to what I'm feeling. There's obviously validity to what he's feeling. So how can we kind of bring these together and find a way that makes it work where, you're not feeling resentful or guilty, feeling guilty for feeling that resent, and then kind of just in this endless cycle.
Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect between the body and the brain. I mean, I find myself, the other day I was scrolling on my phone and this dance workout program came on and I was like, oh, that looks really cool. I should do that. And I went, wait a minute, I can't do that anymore. So it's like your brain is still your old brain, but your body is new and the capabilities are just not there. We're going to take a break and remind you that any discussion of supplements, medications, or treatments are not to be considered medical advice. If you believe that you have long COVID, know that you are not alone. Please seek out one of the many long COVID social media groups for community support. And please make sure to speak to your doctor. Kind of piggybacking on that, how has your life changed since your family member became ill with long COVID? What are the added tasks that you have had to take on?
I mean, there's never a great time to get sick, but this was probably a very inopportune time. I was actually entering like the first semester of my last year of grad school. And we kind of had a conversation. I was like, this is going to be a really difficult time for me. I'm going to be very busy with my clinical internships and schoolwork and just like everything. So I was like, maybe we can kind of enter this every man for themselves phase right now, where you kind of just take care of you and I take care of me and we meet when we can. And we kind of had that conversation, and then he got sick. So I was doing like 14-hour days, and if it wasn't for his family at this time that were able to come and help, I would have had to take a leave of absence from school and kind of put that off until he felt a little bit better for me to be out of the house for that long. But it's changed, but I also call it kind of a bit of a regression, just because, as Armani mentioned in the podcast, he was in the military before this. So a lot of responsibilities and tasks did fall on me because he physically wasn't home to do these things. And then now he's here and those tasks are kind of all back on me. And, it's like, is it worth him crashing to do the dishes when maybe we can have some good, like, maybe have a date later, and or just kind of figuring out what I can ask him to do, because everything is taxing. So that kind of just means that managing our life has kind of fallen to me. Like, we'll be moving soon, and I know that that's going to be primarily on me to pack up the house and kind of do everything, and understanding like I have to take things little by little, and procrastination isn't an option for either one of us now. So I would say our life has changed significantly. Just the emotional labor that I've had to take on extra, and the actual stuff that I've had to take on to do that maybe would have fallen to him before. It's been tiring, but you just kind of take it day by day.
I guess it's just very similar. I I guess thankfully I was kind of ran my own household before I met Christy, and then when we got together, she's here, and yeah, there's some added responsibility because I'm looking after her if she needs some stuff, or the kids with her kids. But my expectations, I just really work on having no expectations. Like I'm gonna go and do the work, and just there's things that need to get done. Those shared household responsibilities. I'm just gonna do them, and well, if she can do something, cool. If she can't, cool. Like the challenge or the friction always comes in the difference of priorities. She might think that something's a priority versus what I think is a priority, and that's where then we have to discuss that, and how do we get that, because I might think something's more important and I'll be working on that, but because she's here all day every day, something's really bothering her, the kitchen wasn't cleaned or whatever, and so she wants that really done, and I was thinking, well, I need to do something different. So that's, we have to keep those lines of communication open, and that's what we try to do. But that's probably the biggest challenge, is kind of just how that shared work is split.
Yeah, a lot of negotiation. Did you want to talk about this? What are some of the new tasks that you have to do now that mommy is sick?
I have to fill up your water bottle and tell you to drink water, and I have to water the plants and clean bathrooms.
Yeah, so things that you normally wouldn't have to do that you have to do now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Susan or Nandini, do you want to talk about any added tasks that you have now?
I suppose, yeah, my tasks are like everything. It started off a lot with her when she was in a wheelchair. She wasn't able to do almost anything. So that was a really big challenge. And I'm also a single mom. I'm divorced and stuff. So have a great, her dad's wonderful, like really helpful on some level, but still everything comes down to me because like it's been a lot of, I would say tasks are all over. It's everywhere. Everything is tasks now.
Well, yeah, my husband and I are retired, and we had a lot of plans, things to do that we had some traveling planned, and then the pandemic came and he got sick. It's been a very long haul. It's like, I was thinking about this the other day. It's been like having a 5-year-old, the kind of things that you have to do for a 5-year-old. And I had 3 children, and I raised them, and I was with them all the time. I didn't work. And so I raised my children. So I've had to really work hard to sort of put that aside, but allow that it's probably reasonable for me to feel frustration, if not resenting the fact that he's sick. And so, yeah, we've given up a lot at a stage of life where we had hoped to have more freedom. And it's like sort of being thrown back into having a young child again, in terms of the stuff that you have to do. There's so much grocery shopping. Because he's, of course, been on special diets, and there's really no way I can get out of it. It's not just a diet choice, at least for my son and my husband. And he does most of his own laundry, but he can just get the laundry up and in the washing machine, and then he's tired. So then I have to move it, and I have to fold it, or not, decide, shall I just throw it in the laundry basket without folding? So all these decisions, this add an extra workload. Yeah, I had hoped that I would sort of be past raising what felt like a young child again.
Sure. Yeah, that totally makes sense. My daughter's going to go now. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. How has being a caregiver for someone with long COVID affected your life overall? Your work, your free time, your stress level?
So, yeah, I mean, being a caregiver for someone with long COVID has really just kind of touched every aspect of my life. I don't think there is a sphere of my existence that has not been affected by, Armani getting long COVID. I would say in terms, again, I just finished graduating, so I just finished school, and it was exhausting, to say the least. It's pretty much just doing from the moment I woke up until I went to sleep, and it was just kind of like repeat that, and just no real break, because if I wasn't taking care of something for myself, I was taking care of something for him, taking care of something for us. So energy wise, I was just spent. I still kind of spent, and then stress level was just through the roof for a variety of reasons. Obviously, because of school, because Armani was sick, and in the beginning, it was really affecting his sleep. So we were maybe getting 3 hours of sleep a night, maybe. So you can imagine how that would eventually start really tearing down at your mental state. And then in terms of our free time, obviously we're pretty limited on what we can do. But I would say on I guess like a silver lining, so I studied speech pathology, and I've kind of been in the health space for a while. So it's not, I've worked with people who have chronic illness, and that's kind of what I've always done. So I feel like I always was empathetic towards their situations. Like, I don't think I'd be able to carry out my profession or my job very easily if I wasn't. But I guess now I have a firsthand experience, and even more understanding of the situations, and maybe the emotional experiences of my patients or clients in the future as they navigate their own lifestyle changes. So I guess in that aspect, as a clinician, it's kind of, this entire experience has strengthened my ability to work with people. But yeah, I would say this has completely flipped both of our lives, right? Upside down. Your entire life changes, and it's not just the person themselves, but it's also everyone who's in their life as well.
For me, I think the first 2 years, when my daughter Leah, she started getting sick at 10. The first 2 years were very challenging. One of her big symptoms with long COVID was insomnia, and until we found, a really wonderful supplement that actually started helping her, but it took a good year before I found it. So that was just hell. She wasn't able to sleep. I was insomniac at some point because I was up with her at all times, at all odd hours. She wanted to watch TV. She was just screaming in pain, and she wanted her pain to go away. Part of me was always perplexed and really angry because I obviously couldn't help her, but at the same time, like, I don't know what's going on with her body. Like, I was just in perpetual confusion. And I would say I was working at some point. So about a year after she got sick, I had to step away because there were no accommodations at the workplace for a mom like me that, I could switch to a different role or go into a different part-time role and stuff. And that was something that's been challenging, not just for me, I think for a lot of parents, having to dedicate full-time support to their kid, and then having to make that really hard decision to step away from employment. Those were two big ones for me. And then, of course, loss of friendships. We had a lot of friendships go away just because people didn't understand. And it was a lot of anger first because my daughter obviously didn't get it, why her friend didn't want to see her again, and she was tired. So my daughter couldn't keep up with play dates or any of that. They got tired of talking to her on FaceTime all the time. And, and of course, summer was going apparently great for a lot of kids and people. So, yeah, so a lot of friendships, we've learned to let go of many things that are just not going to happen. But I can never see myself go back to work full time or at an employment place where I have to be there in person. I just couldn't see that. I think that's a big loss for me because I've always worked all my life, and I'm going to miss that. But at the same time, I've slowed down. I'll be honest, like this illness has taken a toll on my body. I'm so exhausted now, and I've moved into a whole other stage of life physically too. So it's different. It changes you upside down all over the place. So yeah,
I would echo that. I think that I've changed a lot about how I approach life and how I think of life and expectations, and not all actually in a bad way. It's made us more aware of the important things, the really important things, and to slough off stuff that's really not important. And because it's so emotionally stressful at times, and so I had to really find ways of learning to cope, to keep from going off the edge at times. And that included meditation and a lot of mindfulness and, like reading Stoic philosophy so that I could, balance myself and just get on with focusing on right here and now and not thinking about where we were headed, what the loss of possibilities for the future. That's been very good for me because I've always been a driver. Like I've done all the research for my son. First of all, he wasn't well enough to do it. And I wanted him better and out of my house so we could have my life back. I wanted him to be better, of course. But so I did all the research and, got him to where he needs to go and arranged the medications and dealt with US doctors and, collected everything. And it was a lot of work and I was tired. I am tired, but I actually now find that I enjoy my day-to-day life more than I used to when I was much more driven to do a lot of things in my life and get a lot of things done and so on. I'm more relaxed. I've learned skills to cope with other difficult things in life. And so that's really been a blessing for me.
And that leads into my next question. You've mentioned the frustration and the stress that comes with being a caregiver. What are some of the things that you do for self-care?
So Armani, I know he talked in his podcast how he really enjoyed exercise and everything before. We actually met in the gym when we were in college. So that's been probably my primary coping skill. But other than that, I'll to be completely honest, I'm still looking for healthy ways to cope. Sometimes some days are better than others. And I say that because, you can find something that you think is a way to cope. And then sometimes this is more like my kind of clinical brain going. I'm just like, am I coping or am I avoiding? Like, which one is it? Am I disassociating? Am I actually working through? So I would say in terms of like what I do for self-care, definitely going to a therapist is the primary thing. I would think and of course that's if you have that healthcare accessibility. I know some of you are in Canada. I'm not really sure how the system is over there. But here in the United States, there is a huge financial barrier to people receiving any type of healthcare, including mental health care. But, finding that time set in, just even doing that was difficult for me. I kept saying, and Armani was pushing me to do that because I was like, I don't have time between school, taking care of you and this, like I don't. But eventually I got in there and I was like, okay, so that's probably one of the bigger things I do for self-care other than exercise. But also I would say kind of, I always tell Armani, I'm like, I don't expect you to be positive. I think there's kind of a, I don't want to say an invalidation that comes with that positivity and getting people to be like, you need to look on the positive, you need to look at the bright side. And it can be reductive of what somebody's experiencing. I'm like, I don't need, just like I tell him, I also tell myself, I'm like, I don't need to necessarily be positive about the situation or negative. I am kind of just finding this neutrality in this and just accepting that this is what it is. Not great, but it is what it is. And just kind of working through that. And I guess I just trying to practice that neutral. Again, easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, there's positivity and then there's toxic positivity, right? Yeah, it's a fine line.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I try to stay away from, especially like with myself, with him, which can be hard because some days I'm like, just buck up. But obviously that's not how it works. If it was only so simple, I'm sure he would have done it. But just again, working on that, it's not, you don't have to look at it positively, not negatively. And again, this is for both of us, just kind of being somewhere in the middle, accepting that it brings about some negative emotions and that's okay. And just kind of moving forward with that. But in terms of coping skills, if anyone's got some suggestions, I'm open.
We'll be right back to our interview after a short break. If you haven't already done so, make sure to follow Voices of Long COVID on Instagram, TikTok, and X. You can send me a message there. I would love to hear what you thought of the episode. There are only a few episodes left, and they drop on Wednesdays on all podcast platforms. Anyone else want to talk about self-care?
Sure, I'll go for it. I think one of the thing, I guess, to distill it, it's play for me, right? And so, but play as an adult, you think of it like a kid, right? You're going to the park. That's not so much. It's like I go weekly with my friends for wings, and we just have a standing Tuesday night. We go out for wings. The other things we do is like I'll plan activities with the kids, right? So we're going to go on an adventure, and it doesn't have to be extravagant. We're going to go take the dogs down to the river today, and we're going to go watch them splash around, right? Or I'll take the dogs for a walk, right? These type of things. Or there'll be like, oh, that festival looks cool. I'll take the kids. And if Christy can come along, awesome. If she can't, that's okay. Like I just still go out, and there's still things to do. And I don't want the kids to miss out on things in life. So we just keep planning and do, maybe it's not, as I said before, maybe it's not one or four things in a day. It's one. That's what we do. And that's our adventure for the day. And she can participate, but it's just play, right? Like I don't try not to take life seriously. Just go along.
That's awesome. Nandini, what about you?
Well, so I think for us, my daughter Leah has a wonderful therapist that we found about a year and a half into her sickness. And she gave us this advice all the time, especially with me and her when we counsel with her, is that anytime you find moments that are hard to swallow, just give each other grace as much as possible. And at first it was really hard because we used to fight it. And now we're accepting it as it comes. That's one thing I would say is just constantly giving each other grace to say it's okay. She needs that couch time for that many hours now. And it's okay because that is what's healing her body. And I think over time we figured out what works. It's the rest and pace model. And that's what I had to really understand, how to get her resting. The other thing I do is during of course taking care of her and then losing my job, I had put on a lot of weight And that was a part of my emotional eating, and just not, like Allyson just mentioned, like, honestly, I was like, fine, I'm going to binge watch a whole bunch of TV shows, and I'm going to sit on the couch, because that is what I needed. I needed my brain to be fried and to watch nonsense, because sometimes you just need that. And so I pretty much let it be. But now meditation, I love yoga. So I did quite a bit, as much as I could get onto my mat in the mornings. And one of the things was, if I didn't keep the structure, my daughter would slide. That's one thing I noticed about her. And so I had to keep the structure going. Like, I'd wake up every morning. It doesn't matter if she's not going to school, I'm not working, we're still going to have a sort of a routine for the day. And that really perked her up and helped her as well. And now I'm back to doing a bunch of fitness exercises. I go for some classes, and that's now become my go-to. And so when I go, my daughter is able to stay home alone. She has something that she monitors her heart rate, so making sure that she's stable. She's got a phone, check in with me every half an hour. But usually I'm never gone for certain times. So for me, I think instead of having a full-time job, I filled it in with self-care as much as possible, because that's what I need now.
Yeah, it's a tough role that you guys have taken on. So I hope that you continue to take time for self-care.
And I like what Ben said, right? We cannot take life so seriously to that point, because if we do, then we're just I will stress myself, and my daughter will just collapse again, all over again. So, and the other thing too is accepting that there is a new life. Like, so she's shed her old skin. I've shed my old skin. We cannot go back to always repenting of what we used to be. We have to force ourselves to say, now we have a new path of life, and how is it going to look? And that's what has been a biggest acceptance. It took a good year or 2 years to do that, but it has come around. So yeah.
Yeah, I just interviewed Nandini's daughter last week, her daughter Leah, and I can't wait for you to hear her episode. She's just so insightful. She's 13, and I swear all the adults with long COVID that are going to hear her episode are going to learn something from her. She's so insightful.
I think a lot of kids have become emotionally mature with this illness. And they had to take on a burden that they could never have imagined. And so I think that comes with the territory now. It's just, these kids have been through hell and back, and that's the nature of the situation. So yeah.
The next question is the question about finances. I don't know if you feel comfortable discussing this. You don't have to get specific, but the reason that I included this question is some people won't take this seriously until you talk about finances. So do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about how financially this has affected your family? Whether it's paying for supplements and, treatments, or, whether you've had to leave your job. I feel like there's a lot of financial ramifications.
I can speak to this. We are retired, and we've probably, my son is a good saver, has always been a good saver. So he had money in the bank, and he didn't work at all for about 8 months. And then before and after, he worked part-time. And so we had to help with some of the medical stuff, because he went to the States 3 times and is currently being treated by a clinic in New York virtually. And it's been unbelievably expensive. And because in Canada, there's absolutely nothing, because socialized medicine requires all kinds of protocols. They're not really allowed to step outside of those protocols. And so there was literally nothing available here, because he didn't have heart or lung breathing issues. It's all neurological stuff, and they have nothing to offer for that. So it's been very expensive, and he's paid for part of it, but it's been very expensive. But, you know, we had plans to travel, so it's our travel money that went into that. But luckily, we could do that. I know I've befriended a couple of young people in the Facebook groups, and one young man who's the same age as my son, and he lives in Vancouver. He has no money. He had no connection with even having a doctor. He wasn't going to even be able to get any kind of some of the medications that are recommended at a walk-in clinic, you know, and just no money. So I just can't even imagine how people could manage in that way here. And
in sorry, Susan, in Canada, if you qualify for disability, it's $1,500 a month, which wouldn't even cover rent in Vancouver.
No.
So, yeah.
So it's definitely, so financially, yes, it's affected us for sure. We can manage it, but I just, when I read about the young people on Facebook, and how, especially the ones in the US that had lost their job, were losing their medical insurance, didn't know how they were going to pay their rent, were looking for friends to take them in. I just about cried. I just about cried, you know. So we've been very lucky that way. If I had been working, I would have had to not work. I would have had to quit working. I couldn't have managed to do what I've done. Like, you know, if I was working, somebody had to be here and whatever. So that's how it's affected us financially.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, for us, luckily, just because like I said, I was a student, so I wasn't working. Armani was working and is working. Luckily for us, you know, he had a job that he could do online, so working from home, and his manager, his boss, has been very understanding on his situation, and I mean, he's still able to carry out his work. Sometimes I joke that the Army prepped him to work through suffering, so maybe that's why he's been able to just kind of carry on. But yeah, we were fortunate enough that he worked from home, and you know, loss of employment wasn't something that affected him, but still the medical bills, they add up. I mean, luckily we had access to healthcare. Like I said, and like you have mentioned, not everybody has access to healthcare and to seeing the physicians. I mean, Armani has seen so many, and even that has been kind of rough, you know, him saying, I've seen all these doctors and I don't have answers. I'm just like, well, we can look at it like you've been able to see all these doctors, and at least sometimes with medical conditions, it's taking something off the list instead of narrowing down to one thing, unfortunately. But yeah, that's come at a cost to us, quite substantial cost. And then, you know, all the alternatives to Western medicine that we've kind of looked into, that all comes out of pocket, all the supplements, all the gadgets, all the visits to whoever might have an answer, whoever, like, it's kind of just been like throwing spaghetti at the wall. What sticks? What works today? What works tomorrow? Like, you know, exploring everything. That all comes at a financial cost. And I mean, again, like I said, we're fortunate enough that we are able to explore all these options and have access to some of the options that we have had. But it's still something that, if this was not the situation, that could have gone to something else. You know, at the end of the day, this is the situation, and this is what it's going to, and this is what it needs to go to. I wouldn't put it past everyone when they share my opinion of, there's not a number that I would put on helping him feel better. Like whatever could help him, I think we're willing to give anything.
Absolutely. Nandini?
Yeah, so we very lucky. My daughter's dad has always supported us financially. We used to be married 15 years and then we kind of had separated. So we've never had, as a family, we've never had a sort of a disadvantage to finances. The first year when she was sick, I was doing a lot of research, and that's kind of how I got into this whole, I'm trying to understand long COVID in children. And so we made a pretty big decision the next year to take her to Germany for a lot of like blood testing and stuff, because there was nothing going on in Canada, obviously, and nobody believed that there was something called long COVID in children. So we were very blessed with being able to go and get all that done. However, it took a huge hit on most of savings, obviously, for him and for me. And, you know, we had to do what we had to do. So my goal was that we had to find some answers. I wanted a diagnosis. I wanted to come back and throw all these tests that were done on her and throw it on the faces of the docs here, because they didn't understand. They didn't believe us. And so for me, I think that was a very big like motivation, is that come what may, we're going to have to go find some answers. So we did. We went to the US. I have family who lives there, but we were there for rehabilitation for her. So that also took up a lot of financial cost around that. And just, you know, travel itself was a pretty big one because it was post-COVID. And so everything was so expensive. But we had to do it. I was just very determined. And her dad and I sat down and said, okay, let's figure this out. We weren't looking for answers. We were looking, I would say answers, yes. I wasn't looking for a solution because I knew there was no solution. But we were looking for answers, which we were not able to get here. And she was getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, the mother's biggest fear is losing her child. And so the number of emergency visits, no answers, doctors have no idea what's going on. And then suddenly you find this whole European international community that's talking so much about long COVID in children and saying that there is such a thing, this is what's happening. So yeah, financial burden is huge for this kind of illness. And whether it's adults or children, it takes a big hit on everybody. Kudos to you, Susan, because I don't know how you do it. You know, it's funny, you mentioned earlier that when you take care of your son, it's almost like you're going back when he was 5. And it was very interesting because for my daughter, she was 10, but I felt like I was taking care of my mom. And it was almost like she had a lot of those symptoms and she was showing like a senior body. She was literally, life with long COVID was like a senior body at one point. So it's very interesting. It was kind of a combination of both. It's almost like when you go to the really old age and then you're really young, it's full circle. So yeah.
Absolutely. Are there any support groups or community resources available for caregivers of long COVID patients that you've found helpful? Is there anything out there?
Yeah, I can say that I can't imagine where we would be without the Facebook groups. And luckily, I've had the time to read all through it, sort through, get a sort of general picture of what works for some people and what doesn't, and what kind of people things help. And so you know how to pursue it. And the support that's there is incredible. I can't imagine, like, I can tell you that he would not be here if I hadn't had those avenues to follow. He told me when he was about a year and a half into it, if he got to 2 years without getting better, that he was going to apply for MAID, which is our medical assistance in dying, because he felt so sick all the time and he didn't have a life. And his career was just really getting traction and then nothing.
Yeah, it's so sad. I mean, how is it that with this condition, we can qualify for MAID, we can't donate blood, and yet it's all in our head? It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you got the support that you needed online. I want to mention a group that I came across on Facebook. It's called Long COVID Caretakers, Partners, and Support Circles for anyone listening out there that's looking for a support group. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing the personal stories of your families. I know there are many caregivers out there that will find comfort in knowing that they're not alone. So thank you so much.
Thanks for doing this.
No, thank you.
It's great.
Thank you for listening and for your continued support. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. I'll be back with a new episode next Wednesday. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.